All right, everybody, welcome. So before we get started, Fran, how many people do we have joining us so far?
We have about 44 participants. And a quick question to you, is there work being done outside, or is there just there's like a squeaking sound, maybe the earpiece?
Not here. No, not here, and I'm not hearing that.
I heard it when you were
Is
closer
it better now?
to, yes, it is.
Yeah, it's usually
Stay away
when I'm
from the corner.
Okay, great. All right, everybody, so welcome. My name is Emily. I'm chef and coordinator here at New York Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital's Teaching Kitchen. I see a lot of familiar faces, so welcome back to many of you. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm thrilled that you're here to spend this afternoon in the kitchen with us, focused on suppers with salmon. This class is something that was requested time and again. So at the end of our programs, we offer a feedback survey, and there was a big demand for both salmon and techniques. So this class was kind of shaped out of that request. So just so you all know, your requests are being heard, and it's greatly appreciated that you fill out that feedback survey, so thank you. So before we begin, I just hope that you all had a very happy Christmas if you celebrated Christmas. I know that I'm dealing with a little bit of overindulgence. I think this week I have to kind of space things out until the new year. So fish is nice, it's light, it's healthy, it's full of protein. So we're going to be enjoying that today. For those of you that are new, just a reminder to keep yourselves on mute throughout the program. If you've got questions, you can pop them into that chat box. And we are lucky to have Frances McCarthy joining us as our moderator today. So she'll read us your questions throughout the program. And if you are cooking along, certainly make sure you have all of your ingredients, everything that you need right around you, so it's easy to follow. And everybody should have gotten, of course, a packet of information in your email. If you didn't get this, no worries. I'm going to send it out to everybody that attended the class. There's a lot of information in this packet. I spent a long time researching this class to really make sure that you all have the most up-to-date and pertinent information. So welcome, and let's get started. So first of all, why fish and why salmon in particular? So fish is a great source of lean protein, we know that. Also one of the only food sources of vitamin D, which is usually we obtain that through sunlight, but this time of year, it's a little bit harder to come by. So certainly important to include fish in your diet this time of year in particular. And I can't talk about fish and salmon without talking about omega-3 fatty acids. So many of you have probably heard of this in my classes before. Certainly it's something that the food marketing industry has exploded. Everything that has a trace of an omega in it, it's going to say it right on the label. And that's because omega-3 fatty acids are very, very good for heart health as well as brain health. So two really important things that we need, and it's very supportive to both of those. So omega-3 fatty acids are highest in cold water fish, so like salmon, for example, but it can also be found in other fish like mackerel, herring, lake trout. Sardines is a fantastic source of omega-3 fatty acids and very sustainable fish as well as bluefish. That's another good source of the omega-3s. There's a little bit more in this packet about that, and I will certainly get to it. But I want to jump into some cooking right away and show you some techniques. So we're cooking salmon 3 ways today. Very, very simple, right? This is a technique-focused class. So the first is going to be roasting it in the oven. And this is nice if you don't want your whole house to smell like fish. This is a good option, right? Because you can just pop it in the oven and it doesn't really get too much. If you don't have, one of these hood fans and you don't like the smell of fish so much, but you know that it's really good for you and you should be eating it. So roasting it in the oven is one way to do this. Another technique I'm going to show you today is poaching the salmon. This is really lovely if you want something that's not seared and brown, if you want something that's a little bit milder in flavor, and but still very aromatic. And we're going to build those aromatics into this technique. And then the third technique is simply seared. This is for if you are short on time, you don't want to think about dinner, you're rushing around, and you simply want to have a nice piece of seared salmon that is flavorful and quick. So 3 techniques, and let's get started. I'm also going to, of course, address the sustainability of fish and salmon in particular, and where to source and buy salmon. So I'm sure a lot of you have questions about that and where we're using our salmon from today. I will certainly address those as well. I'm going to start by getting this broccoli into the oven. So broccoli, I'm just going to cut the little florets. Broccoli is definitely one of those superfoods. I think that there's, of course, a reason that, you know, if we were fortunate enough to have parents that cared about what we ate, broccoli was always one of those things that was on my plate growing up. So not always something that I enjoy, but I really learned to love it when I roast it. So this is really, really delicious. You can use these stems, of course, peel the bottoms, chop them up, take off maybe about that much, and then use them in a stir fry or something else. And we're just gonna, very, very simple, right? Put this on our sheet pan. We've got some parchment paper down here. And I'm just gonna put it on sort of, you know, sprinkle it around. Everything should be approximately the same size. Put a little bit of olive oil. I've got my oven already preheated. And just keep in mind, I always keep my olive oil for the week in a squeeze bottle here, but otherwise it's stored in a cool and dark place. A pinch of salt, a crack of pepper, and you just want to make sure that everything is, you know, pretty well spaced out and that the oil is well distributed, right? So let's pop this into our preheated oven and get this going. And then we're going to add the salmon to it next. So the broccoli will go in for about 15 minutes. Then we'll grab the salmon and add that, push the broccoli to the side, and put the salmon on the same sheet pan. How easy is that, right? Fran, do we have any questions so far? I know Fran is.
Hi, I'm here. Kathy would like to know, can you poach and steam with the skin on, or should they be skinless? And following her question, Robin suggested that she actually says that she poaches with skin on because she's too lazy to take the skin off. It works.
Thanks, Robin. And Kathy, yes. So certainly, Kathy, I do poach with the skin on because I like the flavor of the skin. But if you think that the skin is a little bit too strong in taste, certainly you can poach without the skin. That's really up to you in terms of what kind of flavor you prefer. So if you want something that's a little bit lighter and milder and not so aggressively fishy, then you can take the skin off. But if you like that, and of course there's some nutrition in the skin as well that gets into the poaching liquid, certainly you can leave it on. So it's chef's choice. So here's our beautiful piece of salmon that we're working with today. I like to work with my proteins at room temperature. So I just took this out, you know, about 30 minutes or so before working with it. And what that does is it ensures that it all cooks at the same temperature. So the inside isn't really, really cold and the outside isn't warmer, right? It's all one temperature so that when it gets into that pan, it's going to be easier. It's just going to cook more uniformly and it's not going to dry out. So that's sort of the challenge when you're cooking fish, is people tend to overcook it, myself included. If you do overcook your fish, I always recommend serving it with a little bit of ripe avocado. This is sort of my trick. Of course, then you have to have a ripe avocado lying around, which not everybody does. But certainly like adding a little drizzle of olive oil or some chopped ripe avocado really helps to kind of add some fat back into it if you've overcooked your salmon. So here's our fish. Today, our fish was sourced from Marbled Meat, which is in Cold Spring. You can source sustainable seafood from them online, and they do both. They do curbside pickup. You can also source your seafood sustainably from Hudson Valley Fisheries, and that is included in your packet as well. So 2 great sustainable sources to get fish around here. All right, and then of course you can always pick it up. I often will use the fish at ShopRite or Stop and Shop. it's good. They have Norwegian salmon, which is usually the kind that I get there. But let's dive into that a little bit later. So I want to get started just by cutting this into the right sizes, and you'll notice I'm using a fillet knife here. This is very, very sharp, and it helps me kind of get through that skin. So just really want to use a good sharp knife and make everything about the same size, right? And this is helpful. You can kind of use the tip to get through the skin. All right. You could also use chef's knife if you prefer. This works just as well. My chef's knife is actually sharper than my fillet knife because I use it more frequently, so I sharpen it more frequently. So whatever you prefer, as long as you got a nice, good, clean cut, right? That's what you're looking for. Any other questions, Fran, so far?
So far, so good. I am sure that you will be reviewing the difference between wild-caught salmon versus farm-raised in a bit.
Yep, we're definitely going to get into that. It's a very controversial subject, so thank you for your good attention, everyone. All right, so one thing I want to note is it's often less expensive to buy your salmon like a whole side like that and then cut it yourself than it is to buy your salmon already cut in pieces, right? Because you're paying for that labor. So just keep that in mind. I like to buy a big piece and then you can freeze it too. So that's really, really helpful on cutting down the cost of salmon because it can be very expensive. So I just want to start off with the poached salmon, and then I'll address your questions about wild versus farmed and all that good stuff too. So my first step is to get my pan warm. Let's add our stock or water, whichever you prefer. So this is just, you can use vegetable stock, chicken stock, any kind of liquid that you like. Whatever liquid you use is going to be the kind of flavor that you're giving your fish. So this is some white wine here. Just going to add some of that. Okay. And let's add some herbs in here too. So I've got some parsley sprigs, tossing that in, just following the recipe that you guys all have there. And we're going to start by bringing this up to a boil. Then we're going to turn it down and simmer. I've got some thyme here too. So let's just, some dried thyme. So I'm just going to kind of get some of those dried thyme leaves in there. All right. So this is going to be our poaching liquid. Super simple, right? I've got that veggie stock or whatever, stock or broth you prefer, or water, wine, parsley, some thyme, fresh thyme, and we're just going to bring that to a boil. Right? Very, very easy recipe. All technique today. Okay, so once that comes to a boil, I'm doing it in a little mini pan today, but because I'm only doing, one or two portions. But you could certainly use a bigger pan. Anything that has a little bit of some sides to it, that's what you want to use. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that my stock has salt in it already. It's not a low sodium stock. So if you were using water or something that didn't have any salt in it, just keep in mind that you want to add some salt to this poaching liquid if there's not already salt in your stock or your broth, right? So did I see another question come through, Fran?
Hi, Chef Emily. Yes, from Maurice, and I was actually replying to her, excuse me. She wanted to know if it's better to bake with parchment paper as opposed to aluminum foil. I was explaining to her that parchment paper is a staple of the teaching kitchen. One, it helps for easy cleanup, and two, it is also better for the environment. Would you like to touch on the whole tinfoil controversy?
Yeah. Thanks, Fran. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much our stance on it here. So we use parchment paper whenever possible because it is more biodegradable. The aluminum does tend to not be biodegradable. It hangs out in our environment for a long time. So I tend to use parchment for that reason. From a health perspective, there's no real science one way or another that suggests that cooking with aluminum is problematic yet. There just hasn't been that many conclusive studies on it. But if you're worried about it, certainly go for the parchment. I think it's a better choice anyway for the environment.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Chef Emily.
Yeah, thank you.
One other question. In past classes, you did mention to us that you can have meats come to room temperature for at least 2 hours. Does that stand the same for salmon and other fish?
Great question. So for chicken and poultry and things like that, let me clarify something. When I bring meat to room temperature, I specifically, it depends on the temperature of your room. So it doesn't mean you have to leave it on your counter for 2 hours. It means you can leave it on your counter for up to 2 hours, not more than that, because that's when it becomes food unsafe and bacteria starts to replicate. So just wanted to clarify that point. If it's a hot summer day, your chicken's going to come to room temperature in 30 minutes. If it's a cold winter day like today, it might take a little bit longer. So that's the only thing that I wanted to clarify there. All right. So I brought this up to a boil. I'm now going to turn it down to a simmer, and let's get a couple pieces of fish here. You want, to grab one approximately the same size. I think this will fit across here. So these are the pieces that I'm going to use. I'm just going to put this into the poaching liquid, cook it for about 3 minutes covered, and then we'll cook it for about 3 more minutes. Flip it and cook for 3 more minutes. So in it goes in our little poaching liquid. Snuggle those in. Let's put the top on. And again, just simmer, right? You don't want to boil it. So poaching reaches a very specific temperature. It's not a rolling boil, right? If you boil it too vigorously, then the bubbles can kind of break up the proteins and it's a little bit harder to work with. So gentle poach, and we'll give that about 3 minutes and then flip it over and give it 3 more minutes or so. It might take a little bit more time depending on the thickness of your fish. Once the fish is cooked, and I'll tell you how to look at that and figure that out, then you can remove it and we'll make the sauce. So let's check on our broccoli. Oh, this is looking really good. So remember, the broccoli is going to get another 15 minutes or so, right? Because it's going to have the salmon added to it. So I just want to show you here, got some nice browning, just a little bit. Right, so let's push that broccoli right over and pop a piece of fish on there. Get this nice big one, maybe 2. And don't forget to season your fish, right? So salt and pepper before it goes into the oven. That's very important. So of course, your fish will have some salt in it naturally because usually it comes from a salty environment, the ocean. So it will have sodium naturally occurring, but just a little seasoning of salt and pepper, and we'll pop that right into the oven and let that keep going for about 12 to 15 minutes or so. All right. So our third technique is going to be the sear. Now this is going to be your quick and easy sear. So it's very helpful if you have a cast iron pan for this. I think many of you know me by now, and you know that I love a good cast iron pan. Certainly that's because cast iron pans hold heat really well and they distribute heat really well. So you're not going to have, one side of the pan that gets really warm and the other side of the pan that's still a little cold. So very important to have a good pan that distributes heat evenly, whichever pan you prefer for that. My preference is cast iron. All right, so the roasting continues. We'll let that go for about 12 minutes. This guy has another minute or so, and then we're just gonna flip them over. And you wanna make sure, my poaching liquid's a little high, but you wanna make sure that lid is really on there so that it completely steams. All right, so as that's getting hot, just wanna make one quick note about searing fish. three quick notes. One is you want your pan to be hot enough. And this is true for any protein. If you're cooking in protein and your pan isn't hot enough, it's going to stick. You're going to scrape and shovel and try to get it off. It's not going to work. So really important that your pan be hot enough. The second is a little bit of oil can be really helpful. So we're going to use some avocado oil today, which is good for high temperature cooking, like we're going to be doing here with our salmon. Or you can use something like what's the other high temperature oil I use? Grapeseed oil. I like that one too. Very neutral oil, not a lot of flavor. And the third is patience. If you are not patient and you keep, trying to poke your fish and move it around, it will not form that nice brown sear. We want that sear. We want that flavor. That is called the Maillard effect, the browning. And that's where we're going to get a really tasty result. All right. So it's getting nice and warm. You can always take a little drop of water, see if it sizzles and dances across the pan, right? And as that's heating up, let's season our fish, salt, and pepper. So there's two ways to sear. One is the way that we're going to be doing it today, which is a sear with the skin side up. So the skin is going to be facing you, and you're going to have your hard sear on the flesh. I find that to be the most flavorful way to do it because it requires a lot of skill to do what's called a hard sear on both sides of the fish. That's how you can tend to overcook it. So I'm showing you the most basic version here, and the most basic version is to get a hard sear on the flesh side, and then flip it over and let it sit on that on the skin side. Anyway, I'm going to show you, so it's all going to make sense. So we got a large skillet. Let's add a little bit of oil. And a good trick also is to press down on your fish as soon as it hits the pan. So I am using gloves today because I'm working with the fish, and then I touch the broccoli and other stuff. So gloves are helpful. So a good sizzle and press. It's good to have a nice long spatula for this, so you can really press down, because the fish, as soon as it hits that heat, is going to shrink up. So this pan could even be a little bit hotter, right? I want this to be a little bit hotter before I add the other pieces. All right, let's just turn over our poached salmon, our beautiful poached salmon here. Flip that over.
Chef Emily, two items that maybe you can just review quickly is, how do you know the pan is hot enough?
Yep. So one way that I know the pan is hot enough is I could take a little drop of water and put it on the pan, and if it dances and sizzles across the pan, that means it's hot enough. So that is one good way to test it. Another way is just to take your protein and gently touch it to the pan. If it's sizzling, when it hits that pan, it's hot enough. So the other thing I want to mention is when you are placing your fish in the pan, there's oil in there, and that oil gets hot, right? So you don't want to drop it, because then the oil is going to splatter up, and that's where you're going to get hurt. It's very counterintuitive, but you actually want to take your fish, get low and close to the pan, and drop it away from you, right? So low, close, drop it away. All right, and then press down with that spatula to get a nice sear.
Thank you.
All right.
In preparation for this class, did you clean the fish? There are a few questions about how to clean and.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So in preparation for this class, I didn't clean the fish. It came already filleted, but I always check for bones and scales. So thank you for asking that question. That's a great reminder. I always check for bones and scales. So what does that mean? It means that I just run my hand kind of over it and feel. You can see I pulled one out. Pulled out a little bone here, there's a little scale here. So you just want to get rid of those if you can. Certainly you can buy fish and then clean it yourself, but that requires a bit more skill as well. All right, so we're just forming that sear. Once the fish hits the pan, do not move it. If you're like, oh, it's a little too far over to the edge, I just want to move it more towards the middle so it's more, just leave it, right? Leave it, and let it sear. Very important. So press, let it sear, and don't move it. until it allows you to move it. So what do I mean by that? If you can see a little bit of browning on the bottom, then you can start to kind of see if you can pull it up a little bit. Before then, if it's resisting, don't try to move it. Then you're gonna ruin your sear, all right? Okay, so we're almost done on the poached salmon. I know we got a lot going on here, so let's make sure we just keep on top of it. Okay, then about 3 minutes on either side. And what am I looking for with the poached fish? So you know what, I'm gonna take this raw fish tray away, so we're sure we won't cross-contaminate. And let's get another board out here for our cooked fish to work with that. All right, so what am I looking for with my poached fish? Just gonna take out a piece, and oh my gosh, this looks beautiful, right? So I'll just show you all what this looks like. You just wanna make sure it's flaking apart, its color has changed, right? It's opaque, and it's just cooked through to the center. So there's a little bit, it's okay to have a little bit of translucence in here. In fact, I prefer it that way because you get, it's just not overcooked, right? So certainly a little bit of translucence is okay, but you do want to make sure that it's mostly opaque and just starting to flake apart as this one is here. So let's bring our stock and our wine mixture to a boil. Now we can boil it. We got the fish out of there. Now we can boil it. All right, let me show you what we're looking at here with our nice sear. So you can see, right? It's browning. Perfect. Flip it over. Isn't that beautiful, right? Now this is the part that is a little counterintuitive. Cover it. And you can turn it all the way down, or even if you like your salmon underdone, some people prefer it a little less done, you can even turn it off. So there's that option too. So either way, all the way down on a very, very low simmer, or turn it off and just let it cook. We're gonna let it cook untouched. Let's start my timer here for about 4 to 6 minutes. Then we're gonna check it, all right? So I've been very focused on technique. I promise I will address all of your other questions related to farming and all that good stuff, but salmon requires close attention to make sure it does not overcook. All right, our salmon in the oven needs a little bit longer, so let's let that keep going. So as you can see here, my mixture is coming to a boil. That's fantastic. We're gonna add a couple things to flavor that. This is gonna become our sauce for the poached salmon, right? So you wanna let this reduce by about half. You know, I'm gonna let it boil out a little bit longer. And once it reduces by half, then we're gonna add some butter, kind of whisk that in, and some freshly squeezed lemon juice. All right, so that's gonna make a really wonderful, flavorful, aromatic sauce for the salmon. All right, whew. That was a lot to manage up here, but I hope you guys followed all of that. How are we doing on time? All right, so 1:30, perfect. We've got about 15 more minutes. And while these dishes are just finishing up, I think we have about 4 to 6 minutes before everything is done, I want to dive into some of the information in your packets here. So certainly, one of the things I want to talk about is farmed versus wild. So I included a page here in your packet. It starts with the challenge. And I'm just going to read a couple of things from this packet because I spent a lot of time putting it together. And all of this information is from a fabulous organization called seafoodwatch.org. Fran, if you wouldn't mind putting that link in the chat, that would be really helpful. So salmon buying guide, right? Look for best choice pink salmon caught in Washington with lift nets and sockeye salmon caught with lift nets during the early summer run. Most salmon caught on the US West Coast and British Columbia, Canada is a good alternative. So they do this really smart thing where based on where you live, they provide you with this guide of best choices, good alternatives, and avoid, right? Because not all farmed salmon is created equally. Not all wild salmon is created equally. So how do you know and how do you learn to choose which is the right one for you based on where you live and what you're interested in, what you're interested in. So if you're interested in supporting the environment, then how do you make that choice? If you're interested in supporting your health, how do you make that choice? So this is mostly focused on sustainability from an environmental perspective. So it shows you here both, oops, looks like I'm getting sorry about that. Did you lose me, Fran? Can you see me? Okay.
You're there. I don't know what happened.
I don't know. My screen just went black. I'm back. All right. So there's 3 alternatives: the best choice, the good alternative, and then what to avoid. So basically what they suggest is they recommend British Columbia, Canada, Maine, New Zealand, and Norway, as well as the Scotland, Orkney Islands, and the Faroe Islands. So there's a whole list of salmon that's sort of the best choice for you and salmon that you should avoid. The ones that you really should avoid is salmon from Chile. And this is kind of going to throw everybody for a loop. Salmon from Norway, except if it's produced in those areas that I mentioned, the fjords and I don't think I can pronounce that word. It's in Norwegian. I'm going to have to work on my Norwegian. And then avoid the salmon from Scotland, except if it's from that Orkney Islands and the Faroe Islands. So it's complicated. Long story short, it's complicated. Certainly, you can buy wild salmon. I'm just going to turn this off because I know it's probably done. You can buy wild salmon. It's a great, healthy choice for you. It's not the most sustainable on the planet. So I just wanted to give you guys different alternatives as well. I don't know if that made people feel like they're more empowered now to buy the right fish or more confused. The long story short is you can buy farmed fish. It can be really good for you and the planet. Just depends on how it's farmed. All right. And then if you want more details and you want to learn about how it's farmed and where it comes from, talk to your fish provider, whoever it is, whether it's the person behind the counter at ShopRite. Hey, where do you get your salmon? It says Norwegian. Where in Norway is it from? Try to learn a little bit more about it. If you go to a fishmonger at a local farmer's market, they're going to love to talk to you. Ask questions, right? One of my favorite things in this Seafood Watch packet is we have the power to change the way that things are done. So I'll read that again. We each have the power to change the way that things are done. When you buy sustainable seafood, you set a clear market expectation for environmentally responsible fisheries and aquaculture. So this is in your packets. Read it. It's really important stuff. All right, so let's check on our fish here. And Fran, do we have more questions now? Did I clear stuff up or is everybody more confused?
So there are a couple of questions about local fisheries. I think you confused a little bit. Confused us a little bit. That's
just fine. That's why we're asking these questions.
You mentioned Hudson Valley Fisheries, and the other one is at Marbled Meat, correct?
Correct. Yep.
I responded to that in the chat, so if anybody wanted to just jot that down in their notes,
they can, Fran.
And then they can visit their websites.
Perfect. All right, so I just want to show you all the seared salmon, right? So this is done. So how do you know? Again, you can always go for the thickest part and see, is it flaking apart? Yes. Now look in there, right? So it's flaking apart. It's not, it's just has a touch of translucence, but hardly any at all. And always keep in mind, carry over cooking. So as soon as you take that off of the heat, the fish is still super hot. So it's going to continue to cook a little bit on its own from the residual heat for 30 seconds to even a minute, depending on how hot it is. All right, so just keep that in mind, carry over cooking, especially true when you're roasting things. Let's check our oven salmon. Okay, so here we go. Our broccoli's looking good. Let's go right into the center there. Oh, perfect. So again, it's flaking apart. You can see here, let me hold up a nice piece for you. Right, it's flaking apart, it's opaque. So this is done as well. Perfect, perfect salmon every time, everyone. No wasting our fish here, okay? So let's finish up this sauce. And we're going to plate we can plate our fish here, right? So 3 different ways to cook salmon, 3 different techniques, all are going to impart a slightly different flavor and, you know, give you a little bit of variety in how you cook your salmon, right? So I know I tend to sort of do it the same way over and over again. It's nice to have these different techniques up your sleeve. Okay. And let's get our third is the poached. Pop this right over here. Beautiful. All right, let's finish our sauce. So I'm just going to, this is now reduced by about half. Just going to fish out those herbs, the parsley mostly. Okay. And we're going to whisk in some butter. So as it's simmering, to make your sauce, you can plop in your butter gently so it doesn't splash on you. And just keep whisking until the butter melts, emulsify it a little bit. And this is going to make a really nice sauce. The butter is going to help to kind of give it a little bit of a silken quality. And then, of course, another wonderful, flavorful element for your fish. Fish loves 2 things. It loves acid, lemon juice, and it loves herbs. When in doubt, if you want to add more flavor to your fish, acid and herbs, any kind of herbs, parsley, dill, oregano, basil, mint, you know, fish loves all that stuff. So let's add our fresh lemon juice. We kind of made like a court bouillon, right? We kind of made a little, like a little mini stock situation here.
Chef Emily, what is the butter substitute if you can't do dairy? Would you be able to use
olive oil?
balance?
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll definitely use Earth Balance if you like that. But you could just whisk in a little oil. It's just to give it a little bit of a fatty, velvety quality. You could also use ghee, which is clarified butter, if you can have the butter but not the lactose. Ghee is a good, like, lactose-free, but still from cow's milk if you wanted to try that. All right. So this is our beautiful sauce. Let's see if I can get a little spoon this over the fish. Okay. And this again is just going to add lots of flavor to your fish. All right. You could thicken this sauce up a little bit more if you wanted to. Also, just let it keep boiling. I don't know if you guys can see with the white plate. It's harder to see. But all right. So there you have it. Your salmon with the sear. Your salmon roasted with broccoli. And you could do different veggies as well. If you wanted to do peppers or mushrooms or sweet potatoes, the important thing is you just kind of stagger the cooking. So you know your fish is going to take 12 to 15 minutes, depending on the thickness of the fish. And then you can sort of stagger it depending on your vegetables. So if you're making a sweet potato, you're going to have to roast that for 25 minutes or so before you add your fish, which is going to roast the sweet potato for an additional 12 to 15 minutes. So just kind of, you have to do a little bit of math for that one, but it's worth it because it's nice and easy, and you get a veggie in with your fish, which is always a good thing. All right, we have about 5 more minutes. I briefly want to touch upon reheating fish because we got all this beautiful salmon. What are we going to do with it all, right? So you may not eat it all in one sitting, and generally fish can be reheated. So that's the good news. Thick fillets and steaks of fish reheat better than thin fillets. So if you're working with sole or flounder, some thin fish, it's not going to reheat as well as a thicker steak of fish. So here's how you do it. If you're reheating salmon or swordfish or halibut, a nice thick steak of fish, place the fish on a wire rack set in a baking sheet. So those cookie racks, that you use to cool down your cookies and stuff when you take them out of the oven, take those and put them in your cookie sheet. So you'll have sort of like a double tray situation. You put the fish on top of that, and you cover it with foil. You can add a splash of water too, just on top of the fish, like a little sprinkle of water to help moisten it. And then you're going to put it into the oven at 275 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes or so. So a gentle, slow reheat covered in foil, so it's kind of steaming, right? And it won't dry out. You don't want to microwave your fish. If you microwave your fish, you will destroy it. So I don't recommend microwaving. You want to do it in the oven, reheat it this way. But honestly, I think the best way to use leftover salmon is to repurpose it. So what do I mean by that? You can flake it over a salad and enjoy it cold. You can spread it over a piece of toast with some light cream cheese or a piece of cheese or something like that. You can make a salmon salad, just like you would make a tuna salad, right? With tuna from your cans in your pantry. Use that salmon instead, same recipe. So use it in a cold repurposed application. I really like it with sliced up avocado on a piece of toast. That's your lunch right there with a nice side salad, and you're all set. So that's my preferred way to reuse salmon after it's been cooked. You really want to enjoy it fresh, freshly cooked, or use it that way. Okay. Oh, you could also make salmon cakes too, kind of bunch it together and pan fry it. All right, Fran, do we have any final questions? We have about 4 more minutes, and I certainly have a few more things in my packet I can share, but if we have direct questions, I'll take them now.
Generally, we are just getting in some quick tips about what people use the fish. They put fish in tortilla with cranberry applesauce, fish tacos.
Oh,
It's a great idea, and it's wonderful to see everybody sharing their reuse of the fish.
Repurpose. Awesome.
Yes.
So I just want to.
There is one person,
yes.
If anybody would like to unmute themselves, they can just put it in the chat and I can call on you. I know Sue Bonilla has a quick question.
Sure. Hi, Sue.
Sue, would you like to unmute yourself?
All right. Well, in the meantime, while we're waiting for Sue, I just realized there were a few things on the roast salmon with broccoli recipe that I wanted to add. So a little bit of rice vinegar, again, that acid is really, really nice. You can pop that right over. Some capers, you can chop those up and sprinkle them and serve them over your fish too. And again, just a little drizzle of olive oil to go with that. So 3 things you can add to your roasted salmon just to give it a little more flavor, some pizzazz: the rice vinegar, the chopped up capers, and a little olive oil. Right. So we've got our salt with the capers, our fat with the olive oil, and our acid with the vinegar. 3 flavor powerhouses.
Perfect.
All right.
Robin would like to know if you would be able to go over how to freeze raw fish. And Phyllis would like to know, besides Norway, where can you get the best fish in the world, basically.
Hi,
Wow,
Emily.
Okay.
It's
Hi there.
Sue.
Who's it? Hi, Sue.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for watching today.
Do you recommend using the sous vide technique for salmon?
Sous vide, listen.
Yeah, sous vide. Yeah, Sue, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. So sous vide has taken the world by storm. It used to be something that really only was done in fine dining restaurants. Certainly, it's a wonderful way to cook fish. If you do have a sous vide machine, you can certainly use it to cook your fish. I got one actually just over this past holiday, so maybe there's more to come on that. I'm still kind of learning and figuring out how to use it, but basically what it's doing is it's gently poaching your protein over a long period of time, so it remains very juicy and it stays in its cooking liquid. The way sous vide works is you put it in a plastic bag essentially, and you use water displacement or vacuum to take out the air, and then you keep it at a certain temperature for a long time. So that's basically how it works. Certainly you could sous vide your fish. Thank you, Sue. And then to address the other questions, Fran, so one was about freezing fish properly. So same thing here. The best way to freeze fish is to press out any air from that Ziploc bag, right? So you want to put your fish in the Ziploc bag, press out any air. If you have even like a little vacuum kind of suction thing, that works really well too. And then you can freeze your fish that way. You really want to use it within 3 months. It will start to take on some freezer flavor otherwise. And the last thing I wanted to mention, actually, this is very important about when you buy fish, you want to use it within 1 to 2 days. A way to extend that a little bit by a day or so, keep your fish on ice at all times in your refrigerator. So you've got essentially you've got, you want like a bowl with ice in it, and then you've got your fish wrapped in your plastic wrap or whatever it came in, put it on the ice and change out that ice every, if it's melted, change it out. So that's a really great way to extend your seafood a little bit longer in the refrigerator if you're not going to cook it right away on ice. All right. And then where do you find the best salmon in the world? Oh my gosh. Well, there's a lot of good places to get salmon. I mean, fortunately, it's one of those fish that everybody seems to enjoy. So a lot of places have started to cultivate it, both in sort of like either in tanks on land, which is not the best choice, or farmed out in the ocean in beautiful big nets where they can still eat a lot of their natural foods. So where can you get the best salmon in the world? My gosh, I think I would have to refer to the seafoodwatch.org to share a little bit about that.
Emily, that wasn't really my question. My question is, when I go to ShopRite and buy Norwegian salmon this week, will they have information of where in Norway that you described?
That's a really good question. I think give them a call and find out. They have a phone number for the seafood department. Right. You can speak to your fishmonger and ask them questions. They should be able to trace, right? Especially salmon and foods that we get in our supermarket. They're very closely traced because of food safety. So if there's ever an issue with anything, they have to be able to recall all the cantaloupes, then they can do that, right? So they should know exactly where their fish is from. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. It's just about that time. I really hope you enjoyed these 3 different techniques of cooking salmon. It's one of my favorite fish, and I hope that you can find a way to enjoy it sustainably, healthfully. It's great for your heart. It's great for your brain. And give it a try. Let me know if you have any questions. Certainly, you can always email me or give me a call. My contact information is always available on our website. And I'm going to be sending you all a feedback survey with the packet attached in case you didn't get it. Flip through this. There's a lot of information in here about how much fish we should be eating, fish and omega-3s, thawing and cooking fish. We didn't really talk about thawing fish. How to choose fresh fish. If you're buying whole fish, how do you do that? And then, of course, our cooking techniques and recipes as well. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you in the new year. This is our final class for 2020 on Zoom. Our next class is going to be on Monday, January 4th, and it's going to be healthy recipes to kickstart the new year, focused on detoxing the body a little bit, right? Some things to kind of help us get a fresh start in the new year. So I wish you all a very happy and healthy new year. Best wishes to everybody. And thank you so much for tuning in. Please continue to share these classes. We've got people who have joined us from all over the world. Please keep sharing them with your friends and family. It makes such a big difference to us here. And Happy New Year from all of us at New York Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Thank you.